is how to remove and replace the spark plugs in your 4th gen Maxima. Also, obviously, it can be used for replacing coils or just checking your plugs or, you know, whatever. This is a remake of the old video from a couple years ago. That one was incredibly washed out, and I cheated by only doing 1 plug in each bank, and the Pearl at that time didn't have a front coil cover. So this one is going to be going through all of them, showing you some stuff, and yeah, basically that's it. So, a few tools you need for this job. You need a spark plug gapper. You can use regular coin style from AutoZone, whatever. I like this one. It was like $10 from Cornwell. So, yeah. Spark plug socket. This is a nice gear wrench. It's got a magnetic retention, not rubber, and it's also got an integrated swivel and 3-inch extension, which is kind of nice, or 4-inch. And that's gear wrench is Danaher brand, so you can get it the same one from Matco. Craftsman probably makes a similar, whatever. You'll need an 8mm socket to pull the coil retaining bolt out, and a 4mm Allen socket or wrench or whatever you want to call it to get out these screws that hold the coil cover on. I'm lazy, so I'll be using a cordless screwdriver. Obviously a ratchet to remove the spark plugs, put them back in, just like using a regular size to pull them out. And then for reinstalling spark plugs, what I really like is this little tiny bastard. It's a 3/8 square drive and a 1/4-inch body. And it's really, I like this for low torque jobs like spark plugs. Can't really think of anything else at the moment, but spark plug is pretty much what I use it for. You can't really over torque a spark plug with that, you know how short it is, without causing yourself pain, so you really know when to stop. But as always, it's all about feel and whether or not you feel that you have the experience to judge a torque value on a spark plug. Many don't, so you can go ahead and use a 1/4-inch torque wrench for that, because they don't take much torque at all. I'll put it in the video, but let's go ahead and get started. So first, you got 4 screws in here. It's really hard to get a camera angle to go wide on everything, so we'll be panning back and forth a lot. And there's another one right there. So first, you'll be removing these 4 bolts. Hold this front coil cover on. A lot quicker doing it this way as opposed to an Allen key or Allen wrench or what have you. And again, I'm lazy. I try to do things as quickly as possible, with as least effort as possible. So remove this coil cover. It tends to bind up on the wiring harness up over here. Just yank that off and chuck it mercifully to the side. Now you can see your coil packs. Sorry. You got number 2, number 4, number 6. On the back it's 1, 3, 5, starting from the left-hand side as you're viewing the engine bay. But you can see the 8mm bolts that hold them all in. 8mm head, 4mm diameter, I believe. So go ahead and remove all of those. Toss those to the side. Now you're ready to pull out this front coil pack. You just pull it right out and squeeze that connector, and there you go. I'm not going to get into how to test these coil packs, because really with a multimeter you can't, not sufficiently. They tell you to check resistance on the primary and secondary sides, and if it fails that test, then yes, it's a bad coil. If it passes that test, however, it could still be a bad coil. You don't know. It could be bad or good. If it fails, it's bad. If it passes, it could still be bad. So really the best way is to check them with like a low amp probe and maybe a coil unplug ignition adapter and a lab scope, which I wouldn't make a video about that, and I got the Vantage sitting right over here, but there's enough of those already. So I think you see normally this will be clipped in to these little protrusions on the front valve cover. But you just pull them all out, and you can see a spark plug. Oh shit. Okay. See a spark plug way down in there. I remember back when I first got into cars, actually when I got the Pearl, I remember looking here and saying, where the fuck are the spark plugs at? And you got the coil cover and everything's all hidden. And I didn't know a damn thing back then. But they're down there. So I usually get these with that gear wrench, like 3 or 4 inch, plus another 6-inch extension on the back of it, just to bring it up, make it easy to get to. Ratchet on there. Go the right direction. That was actually, and they're pretty loose. All these are. And of course, for the sake of speed, now these are some G-Powers I put in there probably a couple years ago. I'm going to swap them out as preventative maintenance to some V-Powers, but if you feel like using anything other than NGKs in your VQ, then don't even bother. NGKs or Nip and Denso. But Bosch, the E3 shit, the what was the other crap? The Diamond Fire, Split Fire, whatever it is. They just they don't work well in a VQ, not at all. Want to use a Bosch plug? I'll get a fucking Euro trash car. Simple as that. But if you put the plugs in a VQ, the one thing you want to use is NGKs or Nip and Densos. So now you can see the factory, or the NGK V-Power, correct part number is BKR5E-11. The -11 means it's preset at 1.1 millimeter gap, which is what VQ calls for. I believe it's like 43,000, something like that. I really like this. It's got the the gapping hole right there, just really nice. But of course, it's got a standard on one side, metric on the other. They really just want to check the gap on these, make sure they come at least close. Let's see, this one's at about 43,000. And make sure you got the sealing ring on there. That little washer dealy right there. Now, of course, there's always going to be some fights about whether or not you put NSEs on the threads of the spark plug. Some believe it's a good idea, some believe it's a bad idea. I believe in doing what the OEM called for, and which is not using NSEs or any kind of lubricants or whatever on the threads of the spark plug. I've yet to see a manufacturer do it, or I've yet to see spark plugs with NSEs from the factory, which says something to me. That it may just be a cost-cutting measure, but if they don't see it as important enough to do it, then I'm not going to bother with it either. So you want to put them back in by hand, just on the end of an extension. You don't want to start throwing them in with a ratchet or a power tool or whatever, because if you tear up the threads in the head, especially something as deep as this with plug tubes, then you're in for some fun. If you're lucky, you can get the plug tube out, get a regular tap in there, drill it out, and use a time insert. I'd recommend a time insert, not a heel coil. I don't know what they make them for this, but regardless, you don't want to tear up the threads in the head. That would be a very bad thing. And also, you're not supposed to change out plugs on an aluminum head while the engine's still hot. You can pull the threads out, whatever. Hot, cold, doesn't really matter. I've never had an issue. Never had an issue with pulling the threads out of the head on anything. So, torque it down. Torque specs will be in the video, as always. And for the interest of time, I went ahead and installed these other 2 plugs off camera. So now you're ready to reinstall the coil packs. And it doesn't matter what cylinder's what, they all do the same damn thing. So stick those back in there, put your wiring harness back over, and plug them in. Connectors on until they click, as with everything else. your coil pack hold down bolts and run them in. As I was explaining in the fuel pump video, there are 4mm bolts, same type as the ones used back there. So you can't put much torque on them at all. If you do, you will break them off. Just barely go hand tight with them, snug. Won't even bother putting torque specs in the video because I'm not going to go there. So put your front coil cover back on and get your coil cover bolts. You run those back in. Same thing, 4mm threads. They don't take much torque. Alright, one thing I forgot to mention. Some people like to use dielectric grease in the bottom of the coil boot. If you like to, that's your thing. I never bothered with it. I never really had an issue with water intrusion or using it as a lubricant to keep the coil boots from sticking to the spark plugs. That's never really been an issue at all. So I don't really bother with it on vehicles with spark plug wires. I will sometimes, depending on, well, if I have any available, I guess. Other than that, though, it's really more just the whole being lazy thing. I never had an issue with it, so until I do, I'm not really seeing the point in doing it. Alright, so once you get the coil cover back on, you're done replacing the front spark plugs. So now we're going to go to the rear bank. This one's made a little more interesting with the strut tower bar right there, which isn't really an issue. You know, just like the fronts, there's nothing really special about these. Same thing. Let's see here. Obviously, there's no coil cover to deal with. You just have straight access to the ignition coils, so that's a good thing. Now there are some things in the way here. Luckily, all this is still pretty much like factory, so you'll have the this little bracket for the cruise and throttle cables, cruise control cable and throttle cable. They'll be routed through here, and they'll be kind of in the way. This EVAP, I think it's purge volume control valve or purge control valve. I had to look it up to see remember exactly what it was, but that some people like to remove. It's just two 12mm nuts. They like to remove that to get that number 5 ignition coil out, which isn't strictly necessary. You can still get to it without removing it, but we'll see when we get to it. First, I'm going to do the first two. Now, good idea on these, and also to remove this throttle cable bracket. It's nothing more than pushing back on this tab, pushing back on that tab, and lifting up, and it comes off. And you can just slide it around back near the cruise control actuator. And like I was saying, it's very similar in the rear bank to the front bank. The coils are shaped differently, and they're well, yeah, basically they're just shaped differently. They're longer. The top part is shaped differently, but still got 2 bolts. One back here. And you see a little clearance thing right there in the intake manifold, so you can get a socket down in there. And one right in front. The first thing you want to do is disconnect that harness connector on there. Tug it back and out of the way. What I like to do is I'll loosen that front bolt, and a magnet really helps here, so the bolts don't go flying. Pull that front bolt out, and that rear bolt I like to take out with the coil pack. So I'll lift the coil pack up as I'm loosening that bolt, and that keeps it stuck in the coil and keeps it from falling out and dropping down, and you'll never find it again. Now, after you got all your coils out, and I will cover number 5 here separately in a second, you're just going to do the same thing. Pull your plugs out, check the gap on the new ones before you put them back in, torque them down, and put your coils back on, put the bolts back in, and reconnect the electrical connectors. So I'm going to go ahead and do numbers 1 and 3, and then we'll get to number 5 here in a second. And here we are. Cylinder number 5 coil pack is, of course, directly behind the strut tower. You might be able to see it. Do that number. There's the coil pack right there. So, and of course, in the way you have this EVAP purge volume control valve, CPVCV, CVXW. You want to remove this. Is two 12mm nuts right on the back. I believe I've done these in the past without bothering to remove them, but of course I don't have my swivel socket here today. By the way, if you have one of those snap-on, the CTS 561, that's not the way to break bolts loose. You do that way, you're likely to break the plastic transmission inside. But, you know, whatever. So, next, just kind of unplug the electrical connector. Let's get it out of the way also. Then you can just lift this up and tilt it out of the way for access to the coil pack, just like all the rest of them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It doesn't really need to be on video since, like I said, it's identical to the other 5 you've already done. I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you reinstallation of this. And yeah, then we'll go from there. Alright, so I got that plug replaced, the coil pack back in. So, you know, I've been spending too much time in Tennessee when it comes out cool. Not coil, oil, whatever. And slide that back on, two 12mm head nuts. Run them back down. And battery's dying. Alright, make sure to plug it back in. There you go. Double check all your coils, make sure they're all plugged in. Well, the front ones you should have rechecked before you put that coil cover back on, but whatever. Recheck all those and crank it up. There you go. You've just replaced the spark plugs and or coil packs on your 4th gen Maxima.